Following what I learned for the infeed table, I was able to get the outfeed table to move, and of course knocked down all sorts of dust that was clogged up under here, but that's fine. Basically, similar to the infeed table, which had the single bolt sticking through into one of the sliding dovetails, on the outfeed side, there was this bolt screwed the whole way in. That definitely looks like a more modern bolt, so it's probably not the right one, so that may have screwed up the dovetail, but hopefully not. But in any case, once I loosened that, I was able to use my small ball peen hammer and a block of wood to tap on here, and that loosened it, and then I was able to just pull with both hands, and this slid back. Now, the other thing I needed to do was I contacted the manufacturers of the helical heads, and they needed measurements and things. So I was trying to figure out approximately what the width of this is, because I don't have anything that goes that wide. My small calipers only goes, the ends of it are only this long, so that does not go down over. So I used a combination of laying that there, which is not very precise, and laying this down over, and then using this to, but it looks like 4 1/4 approximately. The next thing they asked for is how much this is sticking out. It turns out that it's 8 1/8 inch long cutter. It actually sticks out past the head. It's an 8-inch wide head, but the cutter comes out 8 1/8. But they also wanted to know how much these stick out. I think it's like a 16th. I may end up just needing to send this entire assembly, like unscrew these bolts that attach the babbet bearings and the head and everything. I may need to send that to them to get an estimate on the quote and such. I do now see that this whole piece goes down, and I did find out more. These are actual bolts. They aren't little bolts inside. So I need to figure out or make something in order to get that off that would go down in and rotate that, which I don't have, which I could make. But again, if I'm getting a replacement head, I should just leave it as is and don't touch it, and let the people who know how to do that make the new heads, figure that out. So, yeah, but it's 24.5 inches from the end of this shaft to the end of that pulley, approximately, on the other side of the pulley. I measured later that with just a paper wrapped around method, it was 4.13. So, yeah, somewhere in there. Here I'm just cleaning up. After I took the other side off, there was quite a bit of sawdust up in there. And here's what it looks like with both tables off. There is the bearing set, which I'm going to take apart later. But it spins nice. The babbet bearings are there. The wood plugs in the oilers are kind of cool. There's 3 points. There's the bottom, the two sides for how the bearing blocks are attached. And there's the adjustment for the outfeed table. It's interesting, looking at the two overall, there was more rust on the outfeed table than the infeed table. I think that may have been because the outfeed table was towards the door in the shop that it was in. It may also have been previous shops as well. That's some of the dust gets through into the outfeed side. And here I'm going to put the infeed table back on, and that actually went fairly well. Now that it was in pieces I could pick up, it went down and sat there nice. And I found out that the one block that I thought was a 1 was a 4. They just didn't have it pounded in right. So it's 4, 5, 2, and 3 for those lock-in blocks. And here I had to lubricate it before I could get the handle back into its block, but then that worked okay. And I got all the things tightened up. So, because the goal is to try and get it running this weekend, to just test it with the existing head. Here I'm just putting paste wax on all the surfaces, and this is taking the bearing block off and just loosening it up, tapping it, and it was loose, and there it's open. Very cool. And it's oily. Well, it was fairly easy to take the bolts out of the babbet bearing on this side, and from what I know from watching Keith Rucker at Vintage Machinery, this is in really good condition. There's enough scratches and things to let oil through, and there's actually a film of oil on the bearing. It's not dry. This is some sort of felt that is soaked in oil. The shaft itself is oily. This looks like a pressed cardboard spacer of some sort. There's one on this side too. So yeah, that's fairly cool. So this is in what I would consider really good condition. The fact that, there's score marks and oil the whole way across. There's oil the whole way across the shaft. And I'm assuming it's visible. Yeah, it looks like it is on camera. This is just a little stick that's stuck down in the hole, shaved like a peg. So that's where you would put the oil in. And then that just tries to keep the dust out. That just looks like a regular pipe fitting of some sort. But that would go down in, and I'm assuming there's a reservoir of oil or something down at the bottom that this felt goes down into. Looks like there's metal the whole way across. At least I think that's metal. It taps the same as this part. So my guess is there's a trough somewhere down in there, or something that lets the oil come from the bottom up, soaking through this. So here I just went and took the other bolts off. I'm keeping the bolts in the specific locations because I have found out they are slightly different lengths. And it turns out these are not tight at all. It's probably because there's a paper gasket in between. It's just tight enough that it's considered tight, but it's not tight. Like, you don't have to strain. It's just you put the wrench on and you turn and it turns. It's too tight to go by hand when it's tightened, but it's not super clamped down because it doesn't need to be for where it's set up. But yeah, and here, tap it with a hammer a little bit, and that loosens it up, and it picks up off. This one picked up off when left all the paper on the one side, but it worked. So that's cool. This side came off nice too. This side, the pressed paper or whatever stayed on, or both layers stayed on the right side, one stayed there, one came up with it. So this one looks a little dirtier on top. I don't think that's a big deal because it is an oily dirt. But, and the shafts, again, it not only looks good, it's oily. Yeah, there's a little bit of a gouge right there in the shiny spot. You can see the little shiny spot. But, again, it's a babbet bearing. That shouldn't matter, because it would just gouge out the babbet bearing. But yeah, the felt is oily, the shaft is oily. The big thing with these things is, as long as there's oil, it should be fine. That's the one nice thing about this. There's, again, grease, or it's probably dirt and oil, but it's an oily thing. And there's oil on the shaft, so I think that side, at least from the top, it's my guess that it's fine. I could be wrong. It may be, oh no, it's not supposed to be dirty, but it's 110 years old, so if that's all the dirt there is, I think we're winning. And again, this side has a bigger peg. Oh, that one's actually somewhat loose. But again, there's a peg down in the hole. So I'm guessing that's this one. This one screws out. That's cool. But yeah, I don't see. Well, it's dark down in there. Let me see if I can find a flashlight. Will the flashlight be too bright? I don't see visible oil, but I didn't see visible oil down on this side either. But again, that just looks like a little pipe piece versus something that was original. Supposedly these had glass oilers originally, and that's definitely not here. But again, the shaft is oiled, or I should say the shaft is oily, so that's what I think what you're supposed to have. So let me see if I can carefully lift the shaft out. We'll see if that works. And here I got it all sorted and it picked right up out. No problem. That lifted right out. And now you can see how the oil gets into the actual bearing surface. There's felt down at the bottom, and so as long as the felt has enough oil in, it'll get throughout. And the felt is up along the middle of both sides. Same on that side. There the felt is fallen down a little bit. That might be why that's more dirty, but again, it's still oily. And the felt comes up over on both sides. So as long as the felt is soaked in oil, you would get lubrication, and we do. So again, I don't know that, and it's possible that the dirt in there is contributing to what looks like slight, like shiny spots. But again, anyway, from my limited understanding on babbet bearings, if you have a divot in it, that will hold oil. So any of those little grooves help hold oil and help the shaft go. So it looks like the bearing is rounded off slightly towards the head, probably when it's shifting back and forth a little bit. But other than the felt in this side being down in slightly, it still comes up and it touches on both sides. So my limited understanding, the babbet bearings look fine. I would probably want to try and, if I'm going to keep them, clean these up. Well, clean all the outside and stuff up, especially all the gunk around the sawdust and stuff, because that is a ring of sawdust, not something that's supposed to be there. But if we keep those versus going with regular bearings would have to be replaced in this section, because you can see where, now that it's out, you can see where the attachment points are that lock this bearing block in each side in place. So there's two side pieces and there's one underneath for the vertical adjustment. But yeah, that looks cool. I think it is in good condition and it is oily, which is what you want for babbet bearings. So very cool. So now I'll put it all back together. So here I'm just putting the bolts back. I am glad I kept the bolts in the specific locations because, as I said, some of them are longer than others. And I put the one side on. I should have just left those out in a separate spot, but I didn't want to mess them up. So put them all back in, and that all worked good. And then just, again, gently tighten it down with a 1/2-inch wrench. Or wait, no. This is the 5/8 wrench. Interestingly enough, I've used the 3/8, 1/2-inch, 9/16, and now 5/8. So again, just barely tight. It still spins afterwards nicely, so everything works. I like it. Very cool.